The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, musician Jay Douglas and director Graham Matheson on how Toronto got soul. Then, Bill Fatsis on a life that began in violence and continued with his elbows-up journey through Canadian politics. And finally, we took our cameras to a farm to learn about Ojibwe spirit horses. That's all ahead on The Agenda. He was born Clive Pinnock in rural Jamaica to a single mother, but he became Jay Douglas when he began performing professionally at age 17, and he's never really stopped. His career has spanned more than 60 years, and his story forms the basis of a TVO original documentary. It's called Play It Loud, How Toronto Got Soul, and we're delighted to welcome Jay Douglas along with director Graham Matheson, to discuss the little-known early influence of Caribbean music on Toronto's sound. Gentlemen, it is great to... Graham, don't take this the wrong way. It's so fabulous to have you here. I'm delighted to welcome you, but it's fabulous to have him here.
Thank you.
So born in Jamaica, how did you get started singing music? How did it all begin?
Well, in Jamaica, as a young man, raised in the church, a Methodist, and we have what is known as Sunday school in the morning for the kids. Start singing there. In primary school, what we call public school or kindergarten, singing was part of the curriculum.
When did you know that you were not just singing for Sunday school, but that this could be a real thing for you?
Talent show. Pick a star. We had a gentleman by the name of Veer Johns. What you have today, Americans Got Talent, or Simon. We had Veer Johns.
What's his last name again?
Cowell.
Simon Cowell. Yeah,
yes,
from American Idol.
We had Veer Johns.
Okay.
And he was no slouch. He says, you get up there and be smart. You know, if the band make a mistake or something, you're not allowed to turn around. Improvise your way out of it from that early stage.
And that's when you knew you had game.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Should we take a look at a clip from your documentary?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sheldon, rock it out. Let's go.
At 7:30, theater, jam-packed. Trumpet, piano. That's your back here. We sang. You're my love, you're my angel, you're the girl of my dreams. But I'd like to thank you for waiting patiently. Your daddy's home. As a kid, it's a talent show, but they were very strict with us. We weren't allowed to turn around and look at the band if the band made a mistake. No. You have to learn to improvise from that early stage. It was our first taste of show business, and we came first.
That's such a great clip. You still sound so good. And I don't have to tell you that a lot of singers, when they get to your age, and we don't have to say what it is, but let's just say, starts with a 7, okay?
Easy now.
How do you still sound so good?
Faith and locked in with the universe. Be grateful to be alive today, and to be grateful to be blessed in this beautiful paradise it's called Canada. Thankful, and just be true. Be true. Locked in with nature, and it's great. Great. I'm not caught up in the number. No. I'm caught up in, I'd rather you ask me, are you healthy? Are you hungry? I'll feed you. Give me the food and let me grow. And just enjoy the journey.
It shows you're enjoying the journey.
Yes.
How did this story come to you in the first place and inspire you so much that you felt you needed to make a doc about it?
Yeah, I mean, so it goes back about 4 years ago. So we've been on this about 4 years, even though it's a story that goes maybe 60 years back. But Andrew Munger, who's a producer, documentary producer, he had the idea for this and had contacted Jay and then presented it to me as a director on it. And I, right away, like I've got connections to the music and I'm really passionate about the music. So immediately we saw the same vision of this story and helping elevate these stories of Jay and his contemporaries and sort of the cultural influence the music has had on Canadian culture. I also did a 15-year radio show in one of Toronto's probably most predominant Caribbean programmed radio stations back in the day, which is CHRY 105.5 out of York University. And I played the original soul and funk and reggae and ska records. So I was always passionate about learning more about this music. I'm also Jamaican. My mom's from Jamaica. She came up a few years after Jay came up. She immigrated to Canada. So I've always grown up into music and just wanted to discover more of it and just realizing how much there was here in Canada, and that kind of went undiscovered.
Well, that's the point. I mean, you really were a pioneer in getting this music out there, and we're talking 50, 60 years ago right now. What was Toronto like back then?
That's a good question. What you was like, for example, when I came at that time, first thing I noticed was when I came through the custom immigration.
You moved here as a teenager.
Yes. 1964, and my mom came 1954 as a domestic worker. And the questions that were asked of me at immigration, I knew I was in a new environment. And then looking outside, it was in the fall, no leaves on the trees. I said, why, the trees are dying. What happened here? But then again, it was nature, you know, learning how to appreciate the different seasons.
Did you like Toronto when you first got here?
No.
What didn't you like about it?
I did not. I missed the food that I left in the Caribbean. And the cold, because I'm from a tropical climate. But as soon as I got here, my mom told me, she says, listen, you're going to need an education. You need to go to school right away. So then my friend Henry Naylor introduced me to Central Technical High School.
You went to Central Tech?
Central Tech, only to find out it's the largest technical school in the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So large that in my first week I got lost. So they had to assign a kid to take me around. And then that helped me to adjust to the new environment. Like going around to the church halls on Sunday afternoons, singing with different bands, getting to know the city better. And then back at Central Tech, it was a school anniversary then, so I decided to go and check it out at the auditorium, and they were doing a concert for the anniversary. So I went in and saw a young man with a guitar say, hey man, can you help me? I would love to sing a song for the anniversary show tonight. He says, I don't know if I can play what you want, but what do you want to sing? So I go, they call it Stormy Monday, and Tuesday just as bad. Lord, Lord of mercy, Lord of mercy upon me. That was the blues. So I sang it at the anniversary show, and then they showed it the Monday morning to the whole school in the auditorium. Man, I was a star. Everybody wants, hey, Jay, hey, we got a band. So then I started playing in the church halls around the city.
Okay, well, that needs a follow-up, because as we said off the top, Jay Douglas is not the name you were born with. When and why did you take on the name Jay Douglas?
Man, that's a good question, brother. Woo! No, that's the question. I'm happy you asked this, because in the documentary, it showed where a gentleman by the name of Rick Sands came up to me while we were doing a gig right here in a club called The Generator. It was the hardest club to get booked in because they weren't using local bands, American bands. So we got this gig, and before the opening night in the afternoon, the guys in the band start fighting. And we have a show to do, but I'm a peacemaker because where I came from, try to make peace, make things work. So I went up there and I worked my butt off, but the gentleman was at the back of the room And when we took our first break, he said, I want to speak to you. I'm Rick Sands. Come here. He says, what's wrong with the band? You're working hard, but they're not with it. Were you guys having problems? We were fighting. He says, I want you to come and see me next week in my office. He was one of the top agents in Toronto. He says, I want to help you. I don't want the rest of the band. I want you because you're working hard. I said, but I can't leave the Cougars, man. The Cougars are the... He says, nobody knows you. And that's when I became J. Douglas.
There we go. Do you know, one of the things, I didn't move to Toronto till 1978 from Hamilton. So all of these stories I've heard over the years about the Coq d'Or and the Colonial, I never went to any of those places. I saw them in your doc for the first time. Where did you get that wonderful, old, beautiful footage of Yonge Street from back in the day?
I mean, thankfully, it was well archived. The National Film Board, CBC, TVO, a lot of archives exist of it. But it's kind of, and Nicholas Jennings, he was a music consultant, and Clive Walker, they were huge help in sort of giving myself as also a younger filmmaker insights to like what that scene was like back in the day. And it was unbelievable. As Nick Jennings says in the film, it was probably one of the top 3 music cities in the world at the time. Just like wall to wall venues, and Jay talks about it and just the richness of it. So we had to show that somehow. So yeah, luckily we were able to come across that. The one thing that is missing is the Caribbean-owned clubs that were also existing on Yonge Street at the time, usually on the other side of Yonge Street, and there's such a lack of record or archives of those. So we grab a picture and you just see in the corner like, oh, there's a sign of Club Jamaica. So that was always a struggle to find that, but luckily we've got Jay and some of his contemporaries who can really tell those stories.
Well, Graham, that was one of the points, and that's one of the reasons I'm so glad you made this documentary, is that this was a kind of music at the time that was popular, but for whatever reason couldn't get to first base when it came to making records, getting bookings. You know, it was seen as sort of music over there and not music for everyone.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Good question. I mean, there's probably several theories, but I mean, as you said, the music that they were creating, the Cougars, Bob and Wisdom, Wayne McGee, it was arguably some of the best music coming out of Canada at that time. And it was kind of at the same time as reggae was just starting, but they were doing like soul and funk with their sort of Caribbean and Jamaican influence in it. And it was amazing. So, I mean, the talent and the quality is there. Why it didn't get record releases, why it didn't get on mainstream media and outlets, that's a good question. Maybe racism played a bit about it, maybe racism played a bit of a role in it, but I think also, as plenty say, just the music industry in Canada has always been a challenge for local artists to make a living. But as Jay said, and a lot of the other people in the film and his other contemporaries, the industry at the time lacked vision. They didn't know how to market what they had, or they didn't have respect for it, which is just shocking when you hear the music, 50, 60 years later.
In fact, do you want to pick up on the story?
Yes.
It took a guy from Seattle to actually bring you guys to the fore.
Yeah, it was just plain ignorance. As Bob Marley said in one of his songs, in the abundance of water, the fool died of thirst. It was just ignorance, and ignorance is a disease to the mind. I must say this with respect. Where there's no vision, the people will perish. And back to you in Hamilton, this same music, the Cougars that I worked with for years, we used to look forward to play the Diamond Gym in Hamilton. It was one of the main...
now that place I remember, Diamond Gym.
Yeah,
I remember that place.
We played there, and that's how we would go there and play and get to see the guys who played for the Tiger Cats, Angela Moscow, all these cats.
Right on.
They hang out at the time, and these were the music we were playing, but it was just plain ignorance. Unfortunately.
Did you run into much racism as your musical career progressed?
Yeah, we run into music even today. But we have to, I call that challenges. Challenges. And thank God I came from a table back home from my grandparents, Louise Linford and all of them, who taught me how to we have to be equipped to cope to deal with challenges. When we're not equipped to cope with these challenges, then it becomes a problem. It's as simple as that. You know, only a foolish dog barks after a flying bird. Yeah.
Do you want to pick up on the story about the guy from Seattle who actually kind of brought this music to the fore?
Yeah, so, I mean, it was a guy from Seattle, it's a guy from Vancouver, so Kevin Cipriano Howes. He connects with Matt Sullivan from Light in the Attic Records, along with DJ Supreme LaRock, who's in our film, and others of the record digging community. And Cipriano introduced some of these these albums that were like nearly impossible to find. Like the stuff that the Cougars recorded at the time, maybe 10 were in existence of those 7 inches.
And it's decades old.
Decades old.
Yeah.
So he had gotten his hands on some of them and connected with Matt Sullivan, and they immediately, I mean, Matt Sullivan, who's from Seattle, his label, Light in the Attic, is out of Seattle. They immediately were like, wow, this gold mine of music that was here and it hasn't been re-released or not too many people know about it. So immediately they saw vision in the music.
But Graham, you know what? Like, it kind of ticked me off when I saw that part of the documentary, that it took a guy from Seattle to tell Canadians and Torontonians, hey, you've had this music for 50 years. Why don't you kind of jump? You know, why don't you jump on it, guys?
It's crazy, and I think it's the industry in Canada again. Lack of taking challenges and lack of vision.
If I may say,
please.
When they came, when I found Wayne McGee, this young man. Because we grew up in Montreal.
Sheldon, which camera am I going to show that to? Camera 3. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's Wayne McGee.
Yeah.
And this is the guy
who created, on this album, Dirty Funk.
Dirty
the track.
Funk, which became huge.
My drummer, who's still with me, Everton Pablo Paul, they called him for the session. He played the session, and he didn't know he was creating hip-hop.
Well, that's it. You guys were hip-hop before anybody knew what that was.
Because the American journalist asked us, when this album came, he said, did you guys know you were creating hip-hop? No, he just did the gig, get paid, go home, hug up his girlfriend, and continue. But we were creating hip-hop. Yeah. We did in those early years and didn't even realize it. So, but what was interesting, when they asked me to find Wayne McGee, after they tried for a year.
Yeah, he kind of disappeared off the radar, right?
I found him in an apartment in East York by himself. And he didn't even want to speak about the music anymore because he wasn't well. But I called the kids and said, I found him. They thought I was pulling their legs. So they said, what did we do, Jay? I said, you better come to Toronto right away. And they came, brought him a guitar. So I called all the artists in Toronto that I could. All of them. We had a nice reception. And what happened? What was so interesting about these young men? They came on a day it was the worst snowstorm in Canada. I was so embarrassed. But they got an SUV and a map. Nothing stopped them. But what was so interesting, they did not bring any politics into the approach of what they saw, what they wanted. They dusted off and walked out with it under their arm. And that's what happened.
Graham, what's the story behind this album?
So yeah, they did the Wayne McGee release, which was one of their first releases as a new label, Light in the Attic, and it's a huge label now. They're a reissue label, and they find a lot of undiscovered or long lost music. So soon after this, they realized all the music that existed here was incredible. So they decided to create a whole compilation that features several of Jay and the Cougars songs and a lot of the other artists that came up from Jamaica at the time: Jackie Matu, Johnny Osborne, Wayne McGee, the Sheiks. So when this came out in 2006, it was huge, and it was a revelation for a lot of people, especially DJs like myself, who was trying to do Canadian content on my radio show at CHRY 105.5. Finally, there was like, oh, this wealth of Canadian music done by these Jamaican artists. So it was huge. And the tours were huge. They went across Canada, sold out shows, Harbourfront Centre, Pop Montreal, the Vancouver Folk Festival, and it was massive. But then again, this sold out. And so since 2006, it's been near impossible to find this. And the one you're holding on is one that Matt Sullivan and Cipriano decided to do a reissue of it in aligned with our film, the release of our film.
But it's only on vinyl.
It's only on vinyl now, yeah.
No CDs?
No
Not
CDs
yet.
or digital.
Or digital.
Yeah, on other
Right.
platforms. But it's huge that they've that they decided to bring it out again. So it's now available for a new generation.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's a great album.
You know what, Jay? Kids know good music. It doesn't matter what genre, it doesn't matter what generation. When they hear good music, they are attracted to it, right? They are inspired by it.
And you're so true, because the vibration don't lie. And that made me a proud Canadian, a great country. Till this day, I am so blessed. Yes, I was born in Jamaica, but I'm blessed. I was born in paradise, living in paradise. Thank God for this great, great country, which has given us so much, and so much for the kids in the future, because they're the gem of the future.
Let me ask you one last kind of odd question.
Easy now.
When you think of yourself, do you think of yourself as Clive Pinnock or as Jay Douglas?
I think of myself as a messenger of peace and love. I'm a messenger for peace and love.
I love that answer.
The message is in the music, and it's peace and love. Let's move on. We got work to do.
Do you know what? We've had, over the years on this program, a lot of pretty cool people who've sat in those chairs. But no one as cool as you, man. You are the best. Put it there.
Thank you.
You are something else.
Watch it now. No, he's cool.
He's not bad.
I'm not as cool, yeah.
I agree.
Hardest working man in show business
He
in Canada.
really is.
Still performing.
He is the coolest cat I've ever seen. No question about it. Jay, thanks a lot for coming in. We want to remind everybody, Wednesday night, March 19th, TIFF Lightbox downtown. There's a screening of this movie at 7 p.m. It's well worth watching. I watched it yesterday. And play it loud, How Toronto Got Soul. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the early 1980s, a Greek immigrant born amidst incredible adversity entered Canadian political life. Bill Fatsis tried to get elected to Parliament in Toronto, but ran into a buzzsaw of different obstacles. Through it all, he contributed to building up the Greek-Canadian community and laying out a path for future so-called hyphenated Canadians to follow. He chronicles that adventure in his new memoir. It's called Not Looking for Trouble. And Bill Fatsis joins us now for more in our studio. It's so good to see you again.
Good to see you, Steve.
You know, we've known each other for like 40 years. It's kind of incredible.
Yes.
More than that, actually.
Yes.
Okay, the title of your book, Not Looking for Trouble, where did that come from?
Well, I wanted to write my memoirs a long time ago, but I was still with Immigration Appeal Board. And I didn't want to issue them with a pseudonym or anything. It was against the rules of the court. So in 79, Peter Worthington, my opponent for the nomination,
This is the
wrote,
guy who was the publisher of the Toronto Sun.
of the Toronto Sun, he wrote his memoirs with the title Looking for Trouble. So I thought, I'll do mine Not Looking for Trouble.
Well, you weren't looking for trouble, but you found it with Peter Worthington, and we'll get to that story later. Where were you born?
I was born in a very small village in northwest Macedonia, the most northern province of Greece, only 5 kilometers from the Albanian border.
And
very
how was
small
your
community.
How was your childhood?
My childhood was a happy one, although I was born during the civil war in Greece, and my father was killed when I was 1 year old. But my mother and the extended family and my 3 sisters and brother, the whole extended family extended a lot of love to me, so I didn't feel the aftermath so much. I felt like an orphan. It was difficult times at that time, but generally I had a very happy childhood.
But I presume there is sort of a hole that is always in your heart when you never know your father.
Yes, always. And that regrets me, and that's why every time I visit Greece, I go to pay my respects to his grave.
I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring up the first picture here. Image number 1, please. Here's you with, go ahead, tell us who's in this picture.
That's my mother and my oldest sister, Polixeni, or Tseni as we called her. And that's only 4 years, I believe, after my father was killed.
And where is that picture taken?
That's taken in our backyard, which is adjacent to the public school that you see in the background.
How do you think, I mean, you talked about the death of your father, you talked about the Civil War. You know, I mean, the beginning of your life was really quite traumatic. How did you negotiate your way around all of that?
Yes, it was, especially during the Civil War and immediately after. Many children were killed because of the bombardments of the warplanes. They were the British planes, and many children were killed. Therefore, many parents registered their kids to go to communist countries. So they can be saved. So both right wing and left wing in the Civil War, on both sides, they send their children away. So my siblings, except my oldest sister, Polixena, that we just saw, she escaped at the border with Yugoslavia and came back. The rest of them, the three of them, didn't come back until 54 or 56.
So you're all split up at this time?
Yes, we did. And my mother didn't know whether they're alive or not. And it was very difficult for my mom, who became a widow at 33, no job, no money, tried to feed us. You know, she would go and wash by hand all the laundry of the army in the area.
The fall of 1966, you make a big decision that will change your life. What was that decision?
Yes, that decision is to come to Canada for some family reasons, because my brother was here since 1960. And I came for that reason, but I was caught up with the dictatorship in Greece on April 21st, 1967. And my mother was very, very apprehensive for me going back, because she wrote a letter to my older brother and said, you better keep the young one there because he has a big mouth and most of his friends are in jail. So my brother convinced me. He says, okay, they're not going to last too long. Why don't you stay here, learn the language a bit, because I didn't speak any English when I came. I still don't, but in any way.
No. So how old were you when you learned English for the first time?
I was 19.
19?
Yes, 19. And then the dictatorship lasted for 7 years. So then I met my wife here, and the rest is history.
Right. What were you thinking when you were stepping on to the SS Queen Anna Maria?
I had mixed feelings, because my mother, in those days, Steve, it was not easy to communicate. Anybody who immigrated, especially by ship, you know, it was like saying goodbye, see them for the last time. So it was, oh, that's the picture inside Queen Anna Maria, the steamliner, and I'm with co-passengers. The one immediately to my right is from my village, and the other couple is from a nearby city.
You look pretty good in a suit and a tie there.
Yes, actually, that was my first suit ever.
It was, eh?
Yeah, my mother had to sell a little calf so it can raise the money not only for the ticket, but also for my suit.
Nice. Now, there was a minister in Bill Davis's government named Dr. Robert Elgee. You worked for him.
Yes.
And one day he suggested that you get into politics yourself. He said, Bill, you should run in the upcoming, it was 1982, in an upcoming federal by-election on the Danforth. The riding was called Broadview Greenwood back then. When he made that suggestion to you that you should run for office, what did you think at the time?
Immediately I told him, no, thanks. I lived the life of a politician with you now for almost then, I guess, 3-4 years or more. I said, you know, I'm early in the morning with you, and then after that, you make speeches, whether to the Steelworkers Union or whatever, and I have to be with you. No, thank you. I'm not running. And he got angry a bit, annoyed at me, because he said, well, then, if you're not prepared to do something about what you believe in, don't talk to me ever again about the rights of multiculturalism and ethnic minority rights if you're not prepared to contribute actively in this. So I really agonized over that weekend before I finally decided, because he gave me a guarantee that I couldn't refuse. He said, you know, the nomination process is going to be short, and then, you know, you come back. If you don't win, you come back in your position.
Let's show a picture here. We can show these two men who were so influential in your life. There's Bill Davis, the premier, on the left,
yes.
Robert Elgee on the right.
Yes.
And those two guys were very influential in your lives. Were there two politicians in this country you respected more than those two men?
Absolutely. I started with Bob Elgie. He gave me the opportunity of my life. But not only he became my political mentor, but a mentor in life. I mean, he was a man of principle. As you know, he was a lawyer and a neurosurgeon and gave up a huge salary as the medical staff chief at Scarborough Hospital just to come to Queen's Park for $79,000 a year, while he was earning then over $400,000. He was a man of commitment. And then when I got to know Bill Davis and Roy McMurtry, those three influenced my political thought very much. And that's why I decided to join the party later on.
Okay, so you decide you're going to go for this nomination to become the Progressive Conservative candidate in Broadview Greenwood for this 1982 federal by-election. How did the nomination fight go?
Well, I thought I'm going to campaign. I declared my candidacy on the 2nd of June, 1982. They had set a date for the nomination, the 18th of June. So I thought, okay, it's fine. Little I knew that they would postpone it 5 times to September the 9th because some very influential people became the opponents. Ron Ritchie, who was a former MP, and a minister in the short-lived Joe Clark, my leader at the time, government, and some very rich people like Michael Hordo, who owned, as you know, most of Blue Street, all the way from Bay to Avenue Road, the Piercy House and the Embassy Tavern, all those places. He owned a casino. He was campaigning with the Rolls-Royce on the Danforth. And then the last moment, Peter Worthington, the co-owner and editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun, declared his candidacy. And the local riding association were in his favor. So for him to catch up with me, they postponed it until the 9th of September. It was an ugly campaign. There were times that I wanted to give it up, not because I was afraid to lose, but I couldn't keep up in that long campaign. I was not prepared financially, to deal so many months of
But
campaigning.
you had a lot of support.
I did have. I was surprised when I said I need some help. Over 300 volunteers showed up in my campaign office. And the rest...
Well, hang on. We'll get to the rest in a second. You want to see what you looked like almost 43 years ago, giving your speech at the nomination meeting?
Yes.
Come on, Sheldon. Let's have a look. Roll it, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you assist me in welcoming to the podium the candidate for election on October 12th, the next Progressive Conservative member to join the Joe Clark team. Welcome, Bill Fatsis.
This thing, what do you think when you see that footage?
Well, I was not too bad looking.
That campaign, you pointed out it got ugly.
Yes, it
What
did.
did it get ugly over?
It got over for 2 reasons. There was a local candidate, another fellow Greek by the name of George Vlachos, who had guaranteed to me that he's not going to run. And just before Peter Worthington comes into the scene, suddenly he declares his candidacy. Obviously a strategy, I don't know who instigated that, but certainly the strategy was to split the Greek vote. So, and then threats, bribery first, phone calls to my wife, will pay off your mortgage if Bill Fatsis, pulls out of the race.
Who made those phone calls?
Well, someone that my wife said that he was a supporter of Peter Worthington. Now, whether Peter knew that, I doubt that he knew. In these campaigns, there are a lot of fanatics. So I didn't pay too much attention, but I got angry. I said, whoever called that to bribe me, then my engines really got turned on. Up to then, I was iffy whether I should continue or not. And then I said, this is it. I'm going full speed to the end.
All in.
Yes, and then a phone call, again, probably from the same person my wife said that recognized the voices that they're going to kidnap my 5-year-old daughter. And then I went to the RCMP at the time, and they had assigned a guard for me, and it got really ugly.
Some of the coverage, Bill, was really astonishing, particularly in the Toronto Sun, of course, which was for Worthington. But they basically tried to suggest that somehow, quote unquote, the Greeks were trying to take over politics in Canada, and that was somehow illegitimate. How much did that offend you?
Very much, and I think the support that I got from the community was encouraged by his opinion article saying that immigrants who believe in multiculturalism are not 100% Canadians, they're hyphenated Canadians. And that offended me personally and a lot of people in my own community, especially one Greek newspaper that called him a racist, but I paid the price. He accused me in the Sun that I called him a racist, and I never did, but he took advantage of that. But they proved it. When I won, on the front page, the Sun said it went to the Greeks.
That's what they said. That's right. It went to the Greeks.
Yeah.
Let's hear from the winner's speech, shall we? Sheldon, if you would, once again.
A fellow candidate, however, who is known from the little paper that grew, has referred to my candidacy as one of the two Greeks. He even attacked multiculturalism in favor of the U.S. melting pot theory because he thinks, and I quote, Canadian mosaic does not create 100% citizens with their faith, duty, and love clear and undeniable. It is my firm conviction that new Canadians, regardless of origin, hyphenated or not, are proud Canadians, 100% Canadians with their faith, duty, and love for Canada clear and undeniable. Canadianism is not defined by the date of which one's parents or grandfathers came to this country. Multiculturalism is not a thing of interest to just one group. It's a state of being and a way of thinking about one's neighbors. English, Scottish, Irish, French, Italians, Portuguese, Chinese, Hindu, Vietnamese, or Greeks. We're all Canadians, and we're all free to preserve and to promote our cultural heritage with the blessing of our governments.
Now, multiculturalism today is a fact of Canadian life, but we have to remember back then, the Multiculturalism Act that Parliament had passed was barely 10 years old. It was just a little over 10 years old.
In 1982, when the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms came into existence, for the first time we saw the protection of multiculturalism and minority groups, culture groups, being entrenched in the Section 27 of the Charter that says that, from now on, any interpretation of the Charter would be consistent with preserving the Canadian heritage, which is included ethnic for the first time. And it was very difficult, totally different than what it is. It was what they called, those that analyze this law were the first one in the world to enact multiculturalism law in the entire world. And it was the second phase after the 71 that developed, and it came all the way to 82, and then the institutionalization period for multiculturalism came from 82 onwards.
Now, after a nomination meeting, what the party hopes will happen is that the winner is able to convince all of the people he or she defeated to come together, and everybody's going to support the victorious candidate and go and take on the other parties. That did not happen in your case. What happened in your case?
No, it did not. When I won, I expected all the ones that lost would support, and they did, except Peter Worthington.
What did he do?
He resigned the party, and he became an independent candidate in the same area.
And he ran as an independent?
He did run as an independent, and of course that affected my campaign quite a bit, actually.
Because it split the Conservative vote.
Well, Alan Gregg, who was the pollster then, as you know, Decima polling at that time, showed me in the by-election, which was October the 12th of 1982, to be the front runner to win. Until Peter Worthington came in, and we knew about a week before the actual date of the by-election, we slipped back because we split the PC vote.
So the NDP won the riding?
The NDP, Lynn MacDonald.
Won. And we should actually put this on the record. You were having a by-election in Broadview Greenwood in the first place because who stepped down?
Bob Ray.
Bob Ray, that's right.
He
held the
resigned
seat
his
federally.
federal seat to become the Ontario NDP leader.
Very good. Okay, so the NDP carries the by-election, but of course there's a federal election less than 2 years later. But you decide not to try to challenge for the seat again. How come?
Yes, I'll tell you why, Steve. I was approached by the party to run again, and we knew the polls were so favorable when Brian Mulroney was the leader for the September the 4th, 1984 election. It was very favorable environment for me to try again. However, I was convinced that Peter Worthington would run again against me. And I did analyze that to the director of the federal party. And I said, it's not a good idea because he'll do exactly the same thing. And he proved it later on when Nancy Algie went for the nomination. He did interfere, and he ran then afterwards. And when everybody won across the country, as you know, the only two was, I think it was a city in Newfoundland, and the other one was Peter Worthington in Broadview Greenwood that had come back to the fold of the party. Brian Mulroney allowed him to come back, and then he ran in Broadview Greenwood and he lost.
He lost, yeah. Now, this is more than 42 years ago, and I want people who are watching or listening to this to understand, like, what a big deal this nomination meeting was. This made national headlines. It was so raucous. It was so, like, elbows up, and I mean, it was really, really intense.
Yes.
When you think about it all these years later, what stays with you?
Well, Steve, it was raucous for the reasons that we're discussing. And the thing is that it was for the first time in Canadian political history that losers don't work for the winner. And it's been documented to this day as a president, and also as a president, he studied in political science texts at the University of Toronto and elsewhere, is the biggest local nominating convention in terms of numbers and voters. And so when I think back, I think I advanced my ideas, although I lost, for the first time ever. And to my knowledge, I was the first immigrant to run for federal political office, especially with the Tories that, never voted conservatives at the federal level. So I think I was a pioneer, and I feel proud that because of my candidacy, when other people from minorities, especially the ones that were born here, so someone like me with an accent be involved in politics, they were encouraged and they followed, and they did.
All right, when you look back at it all, your community work, your political work, your judicial work, work on behalf, family heart, I mean, it's all chronicled in the book here. What do you hope people take from this book if they read it?
Well, two things. I think minority groups now should take a look, and if I could do it, they could do it much better. And the essence of multiculturalism has changed in all these years. Now, as I say in my book, Driving One Day in Court, in one writing, I saw all three candidates from the main three parties were from the same minority group. And I thought, how much it has changed in the years since I was trying to be involved in politics. But now the responsibility is on our side now. We have to communicate with each other to contribute to the mix of what is creating the new Canadian culture. Sure, we do have new immigration from Eastern countries and other Muslim countries, which is a bit different than the traditional Christian or Jewish from European immigration. It has changed. It's different. It's a different culture. However, I think it's our duty now to become the Canada of essence, which creates a new Canadian culture, a mixture of all the cultures, along with the traditional Anglo-Saxon or Francophone cultures in Canada. I think it's incumbent on us to do that.
And you've been championing that message for going on 5 decades now.
Yes.
So well done. Well, you may not have been looking for trouble, but it seemed to find you, and the result is a pretty good story, Mr. Fatsis, so well done. Not Looking for Trouble is the title of the book. Bill Fatsis has been our guest. Great to see you again. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you for the invitation.
I grew up, like probably all other, equestrians and people, in believing that the horses came to Turtle Island or North America with colonization. And I think that's a really common belief. And, for a long time, our elders have said through our oral history that the horses were here, the ponies were here. And so an important discovery and path with these Ojibwe spirit horses has been collecting those oral traditions and histories of the elders and, the generations that had the connection with the ponies. But it's now been backed up by, they have separate DNA, so they are genetically distinct from the horses that came with the Spanish. It just really supports our elders' teachings that the ponies were here and living, in partnership with our communities for many years before the settlers came.
Very curious ponies, aren't you? Hey, you're very curious ponies. Yeah.
So we are here today at Medawoki Farm, which is an Anishinaabe word which means to share the land. While we've been in Indigenous tourism for almost 25 years, we were really struggling to find a place where we could have more land-based learning and experiences, and we came across this farm, and so we opened in 2021. Farm might seem an unusual venue for an Indigenous tourism experience. We had come across the Ojibwe spirit horses, and we really knew they were part of the story we wanted to share and kind of how it mirrored our story, our community's story, in terms of being taken from the land and the resilience of still being here and that connection. Medawoki Farm, it's really allowed us to, create these interactive experiences, share our Indigenous cultures, support that path to reconciliation. We create employment, self-employment, small business opportunities through a vast array of activities. So we have a lodge where we can welcome groups for year-round experiences.
Drums, it's pretty universal across North America, but there are many different types of drums. My name is Wema Tendesi, and I'm a cultural ambassador here at Medawoki Farm. I really do a lot of facilitating. I'm the one who greets you at the door, and brings you through all your programming for that day. I've been singing since I was a little guy. It's one of those things where, again, it's a responsibility. I was taught that, these drums are tools, that they're not toys, and that you have a responsibility to your community. It's my responsibility to sing the proper songs at the proper time. So I have to learn many songs, and I have to learn songs for specific times. So when I sing for you, if I'm going to sing for you, it's going to be a welcoming song. It's going to be to welcome you, to our land here today, to, get our day started in a good way. Whatever drum beat we're doing, again, many different nations have different beats, but they all have this sort of 1-2 beat. And what that's representing is the heartbeat of Mother Earth. And it's a sound that's very soothing to all of us because it was our first sound that we've heard. It was our mother's heartbeat. So whenever we make songs, it's with that beat. What we kind of offer here is a lot of different workshops. Our basic programming is our intro to Indigenous culture, kind of giving people a big picture look at to what Indigenous culture is. And then they kind of have a lot of add-ons that they can do onto it, a lot of different art workshops, dance workshops, music workshops, again, all to kind of give you that big picture look at to what Indigenous culture is. We really tried to get that across, where we're talking about how our people lived cyclical lives, where we would move with nature and have that connection with the land.
You good boys. You want to go short?
When I first heard of the Ojibwe spirit horses during the pandemic, I think I was so blown away because, being an Ojibwe person myself, I'm from Curve Lake First Nation, as are my daughters, members of Curve Lake, and we've been very involved in the equestrian world for, many years now. I called straight home to my auntie and I was like, what is this about Ojibwe spirit horses? And I think if I was in those two worlds and I had not heard of them, to me it was such a big part of our story and our history that Canadians and our own community who have lost touch over all of these years of colonization, lost touch with the horses and what they meant to us, how they were, sacred beings and partners and lived in harmony with our communities, and that we had all lost touch, of those stories and those teachings. And so they really give a good opportunity to share those stories with the public, but also to allow our community to rebuild those connections and get to have that connection with the spirit horses. So this here is Cedar Gijik. She was the first foal we ever had born here at Medawaki Farm. And she's actually a really great example of some of our Ojibwe horse breed markers. And she's got the really fuzzy ears you can see here. So it helps this time of year with the bugs and in our Canadian winters. She's got a beautiful dun color, is the color of her coat. She's got kind of the tri-colored mane, and she has the dorsal stripe going down her back as well. She's got some really great tiger striping, the horse striping on her leg. She is a perfect example of our Ojibwe spirit horse breed. The last four were actually near Lac La Croix First Nation in Ontario. There's a beautiful story about there was a number of men who were really concerned that we were almost losing this breed, and they knew the history of them. So there was Fred Isham, who was an Indigenous man, had gotten together some Indigenous and non-Indigenous partners and said, we have to save these last four. They captured them, rescued them, and actually took them across the ice into the northern U.S. And I think at the time everybody believed they were, Mustangs or related to the Mustangs, and it was through the DNA they realized this was a distinct breed. And so they've slowly started making their way back into Canada, although they are found in the northern U.S. as well. And slowly, through really dedicated efforts of the Ojibwe Horse Society, been rebuilding this breed, and they are still rare and endangered. There's less than 200, so they are far off from being off the endangered list. We had lost the last stallion to the breed, was shot accidentally, believing it was a moose in the forest. So when these last four horses were rounded up and taken over the ice, the heist across the ice they call it, when they were taken over to northern U.S., they realized these were the very last horses. There was no stallions left to continue the breed. And so the decision was made to breed the mares with a Mustang, with Smoky Mustang, who shared a lot of the same breed characteristics. So through the generations, it has gotten, closer to full-blooded, but they were bred with a Mustang.
And he's got beautiful mixed mane, and he's got the startings here of all of the striping on the legs.
I do think a lot of these reconciliation efforts put a lot of onus on the community to be the ones teaching and sharing and changing perspectives. And I think it's important to recognize that, not every single Indigenous person has that knowledge and teachings. They've grown up often in an urban area, disconnected from their elders and culture. And so I think that's challenging. And, and I think it's a little challenging to expect our communities that are in various stages of healing through that process to be the ones sharing that message too. Which is why I think, again, Indigenous tourism, I think is that, that balance. We ensure that all of our cultural ambassadors, they're knowledgeable, they've gotten teachings from the elders and the community, and they're sharing something that's appropriate, something their community supports in them sharing, that they have the background and knowledge to do so. And I think it's important for that financial or economic reconciliation because it's not just putting the community in the position of having to be the teachers, but it's giving them employment and opportunities to do it, for an income. and not at their own burden. So I think that tourism creates that space, you know, and brings the right resources to the people that have the knowledge and teachings to be able to share.
We get that question a lot. You know, what can I do? You know, how can I learn? How can I learn about Indigenous people? How can I learn about the culture? And we're in very much of a time right now where it's this kind of gray area, right? We're in a time of truth and reconciliation where, you know, Canadians are trying to learn about Indigenous people. They're trying to learn about Indigenous issues, and they're trying to do it in a safe way. That's a big part of what this place is all about here, is we're trying to create that safe space, you know, for regular Canadians to come here, to come and learn about Indigenous people without feeling, you know, shunned or, you know, whatever feelings that they kind of get over that. But my advice whenever I speak to people about learning about the culture is to go to those communities. Wherever you are in Canada, it doesn't matter which city, which town you're in, within 2-3 hours there is an Indigenous community near you. I always say go to powwows, you know, go to these celebrations that are, you know, open to the public, and go there with an open mind, you know, go there to learn, listen, you know, talk. Don't be afraid to speak with the elders, speak with the dancers, the singers, you know, ask questions. Always ask questions.
And that is the agenda for Monday, March 17th, 2025. Hope you had a happy St. Patrick's Day today. Tomorrow on the program, should Ontario's capital city adopt congestion pricing to help to try to put an end to our traffic woes? We'll explore that. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.